Now more with Frank Gaffney.
We're back. We're joined by one of my favorite people in Washington. He is Richard Manning. These days, he is the president of Americans for Limited Government, a simply indispensable organization in the nation's capital. He formerly served in the Department of Labor under George W. Bush, running their public affairs section, and prior to that, for almost 10 years, as a lobbyist for the National Rifle Association. And I thought, Rick Manning, in addition to saying welcome to you, we're always delighted to have you, that I might just toss the first question to you about this idea that what we're dealing with is a question of gun violence when we see a jihadist like this fellow Omar Mateen killing 50 or so people, maybe more. Is that how you see it?
We have, Frank, first of all, thanks for having me on. It is one of the most astonishing things to see the most obvious example of why the administration's policy of just wholesale turning a blind eye toward Islamic terrorism and turning a blind eye towards it and blaming gun ownership for that, for the inevitable consequence of allowing really bad people with really bad intent into our country, and then not really keeping an eye on them even when they rise to the level of getting on the watch list. We're suffering from a willful blindness of the left, and it may be that it's just too scary to look at, but I really think it's something different. I think we're looking at people who've decided that they can't accept that groups that they have assigned victimhood to are really the evil that they fear. They can't accept that at its core, and as a result, it challenges every one of their precepts. And if they really look at this incident in Orlando, this tragedy, if they look at it with honest eyes, they have to reevaluate everything. And if they reevaluate everything, then everything Obama's been doing is wrong.
Well, and there's a lot of evidence that that's the case. You know, Rick, speaking of victimhood, it is interesting to me that it seems there's a ranking of victims in terms of their priority for the left. It's now evident that what we had thought was one of their favored victim groups, namely the LGBT community, as it's called, isn't as important to them as is the Muslim victimhood community. And that they're now essentially throwing the gays under the bus in the interest of protecting Sharia adherent Muslims, at least, from any criticism over their sort of doctrinal, how do you put it, homophobia. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, it's stunning, but, the truth is the so-called LGBT community has allowed that to occur because they've closed their eyes to the obvious. They've closed their eyes to videos of ISIS throwing gay people off of towers and killing them. They've closed their eyes to speech after speech. If it could not be more hate-filled speech in terms of killing gays. What we've seen is a historic pattern here of the gay community itself embracing a community that wants to kill them, under a misconception that because they're all victims in their mind, they're all on the same side, when in fact they are embracing the very knife that wants to behead them. It is insane to do so. I think this has been may have been a huge wake-up call for that community, and it showcases what we really need. We really need to be aggressively protecting America from the incursion of thousands of more refugees, many of whom may be jihadists.
Let me ask you, Rick, speaking of sort of the larger national interests, you have done a superb job at Americans for Limited Government, sort of holding up the importance of American sovereignty. And there are two particular places where it seems to me it's in serious jeopardy at the moment. And I'd like to talk to you about them in turn, starting with the issue of the surrender of the role that the United States has been playing in essentially managing the Internet to certain unnamed and not entirely clear international stakeholders. Talk about what's going on there and what might be done yet to prevent that from happening.
Well, it really is a scary thing. Here's what's happening. The United States has managed has had the contract for managing the naming functions like .com, .net, .org, and the like. And they've had that since the inception of the Internet, the World Wide Web. We've hired a company, a 501c3, to manage that for us as a vendor called ICANN. Now there's a push, and President Obama is in the final stages of finalizing the giving away of the actual property of managing the Internet, giving it away to the vendor that has, in fact, been managing it. The reason this matters, Frank, is really, really simple. The Chinese showed us why it matters about last fall. What they've done in China is they said to somebody who manages the .xyz domain name that if you can come and do business in China, but you have to ban these 12,000 words from being part of any domain name. And they were things like liberty and things like that, really offensive words. And it showed the way that the Internet can be censored through this process, because it isn't hard to know that all that has to happen is for the top-level domain holders, the registrars, to succumb to those kind of pressures. And suddenly it isn't just the top-level domains that get censored, but it's down below those domains where they say to GoDaddy, we don't really want anybody who uses the word liberty preponderance of times in their websites, and suddenly those people get their websites wiped out. This isn't a 1-year process. It's not a 5-year process. It's a 20-year process, but it's a verbal cleansing of words that offend. And what those words that offend today might be totally different words 20 years from now. And that's the process kind of that they're going under.
Thought control, really. I've been heartened by legislation that Senator Ted Cruz and Representative Duffy have offered in the Senate and House, respectively, and also that Texas Congressman John Culberson has initiated as a chairman of the relevant appropriations subcommittee. Give us a flavor of whether this we might yet be able to pull back from the brink, Rick Manning.
We have a shot. It's not a good shot, but we've got a shot. And here's the state of play. The transition occurs probably on August 15, because the Obama administration will contend that they don't have to pay any money, they don't have to spend any dollars to do the transition, and as a result, they can ignore, as they have anyway, the prohibition on spending money to proceed with the transition. There's been a prohibition for 2 years in the budget from proceeding with this transition, yet the Obama administration has spent thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars going around the world facilitating the transition. So they've ignored the defund up until now. Here's what Ted Cruz has done along with Sean Duffy is they have legislation that would specifically say you cannot do this without a vote of Congress. The problem is legislation needs to be signed by the president, and that isn't going to happen. But it does give us some vehicles to try to stick on to must-pass legislation that's going to be going on in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and that's our time frame. So we are in a sprint right now to stop this. We have a shot. We have a great opportunity to get it done. Take people letting their members of Congress know, don't let Obama give away the Internet. Under no circumstances. They just have to tell Congress, don't let Obama give away the Internet under any circumstance.
Yeah, you can find out more about all of this at getliberty.org, one of those domain names that will presumably be imperiled, as you say, Rick Manning, if the administration and the Chinese have their way. Very quickly, TPP, another threat to sovereignty. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have indicated they're opposed to it. Is it dead, do you think?
No, it's not dead, because the challenge with TPP is they passed fast-track legislation last year, and if President Obama presents it under the right format, Congress will have to bring it up. And if they bring it up during a lame duck session, when you have about 25 to 30% of the members of Congress looking for a new job, and the people who will hire them are the ones who want TPP to pass, basically all bets are off. What we have to do now is we just have to win. We have to beat them up and say no TPP, no TPP, no TPP, and in doing so, create such a political firestorm if they try to move it that it doesn't survive.
Well, we hope that will be the fate of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We appreciate your leadership on this as on so many other things. Rick Manning. Next up, we'll be speaking with Frank Calzone. Straight ahead.
Go to securefreedomradio.org today. It's your freedom. It's your country. Frank Gaffney's Secure